President Trump gets ready to address CPAC, or some are calling it TPAC. I'm Vladimir Dutia in for Elaine Keano. Red and Blue starts now. Ahead on the program, a new CBS News poll takes the nation's pulse on the president. We have a full report card on month one in office. And former House Speaker John Boehner offers up a dose of real talk to Republican members of Congress about their plans for Obamacare. But first, President Trump speaks in just hours at CPAC, the annual Republican Policy Conference. He skipped it as a primary candidate last year, but now the event is all about him, and he'll likely address the topic that Americans call the most important issue: immigration. In our CBS News poll out Thursday, Americans said it was the top problem the president and Congress need to address, followed by the economy and jobs, along with health care. In a Reuters interview Thursday, Mr. Trump said he could bring jobs back to the U.S. with a controversial tax on imports. And in that same interview, he sent a warning to North Korea with a pledge to build up the U.S. nuclear arsenal.
It would be wonderful. A dream would be that no country would have nukes. But if countries are going to have nukes, we're going to be at the top of the pack.
Vice President Pence spoke to CPAC on Thursday night, offering what may be a preview of the president's address.
America's Obamacare nightmare is about to end. You know, despite the best efforts of liberal activists at town halls around the country, the American people know better. Obamacare has failed, and Obamacare must go. This failed law is crippling the American economy and crushing the American people.
We also heard from Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, an influential voice in the president's inner circle who rarely speaks in public.
You know, the campaign was the most chaotic, by the media's description, most chaotic, most disorganized, most unprofessional, had no earthly idea what they were doing. And then you saw them all crying and weeping that night on the 8th. It's not only not going to get better, it's going to get worse every day in the media. And here's why. But by the way, the internal logic makes sense. They're corporatist, globalist media that are adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has. Here's why it's going to get worse. Because he's going to continue to press his agenda. And as economic conditions get better, as more jobs get better, they're going to continue to fight. If you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you are sadly mistaken.
Weijia Jiang is outside CPAC in Oxon Hill, Maryland. So Weijia, we heard some strong words there from White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. How was he received by the crowd?
You know, Vlad, because this was such a rare public appearance, there were so many people packing the room, just eager to see him speak in public. And then he got a warm reception because he was very blunt. He went after the media, and that wasn't surprising. It was just echoing what his boss has been saying for so long. By the way, the media workspace is in the same very ballroom, so all the journalists were gathered there, and you heard the crowd cheering and laughing when Bannon was speaking. So certainly he got a very friendly reception.
And Weijia, we also saw a show of unity on that same stage from Bannon and White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Did it appear genuine to folks or like a strategy?
You know, Vlad, I think it's appropriate to say budding bromance ? Because certainly there were so many handshakes, so much smiling by these two men who know their audience. I mean, the conservative movement right now is on a high. They are determined to get things done, and they do not want to see any appearance of weakness as a result of infighting. And Priebus himself said on stage, he referenced the various reports that he and Bannon not only dislike each other, but are in fact working against each other in the White House. So this was a golden opportunity to shut that down. They praised each other and they vowed to work together. So we'll have to see how this relationship progresses. It's very young, and they have said even today that one reason they work is that they agree to disagree.
And Weijia, this is the first CPAC in a while where Republicans have held the White House and both houses of Congress. What's the feeling out there among members of the GOP?
You know, Vlad, it's almost like a celebration. There's undeniable optimism, and you see crowds together, and they're very happy because for the first time they feel like, hey, we can do what we want to do in Washington. And a lot of that was fueled all day long by members of the Trump administration who were still taking a victory lap. They're still talking about the historic win and election night and proving all the skeptics wrong and going over that long list of accomplishments the president has already done, in their words. So they certainly are excited for this brand new chapter.
All right, Ouija, let's look ahead to Friday. President Trump is supposed to take to the podium to address the conference. What are you hearing that we will hear from the commander-in-chief?
So the president has to do a delicate dance given his history with CPAC. I mean, in the past, he's been booed. People have walked out of his speeches. And just last year, he canceled his appearance. So he really has to connect with the conservative movement and say, I'm here, I'm listening to you. I'm not a traditional conservative, but I'm willing and ready to work with you, because he needs them as much as they need him to accomplish what they want. And it's not going to be tough for him. He just has to talk about the issues that are most important to the participants here: immigration reform, fair trade, the economy, replacing Obamacare. Of course, these are things he's been working on since taking office.
All right, Ouija Jiang at CPAC in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Ouija, thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, let's turn to Michael Graham in the CBS News Washington Bureau. He is the creative director at Media DC, which publishes the Washington Examiner, the Weekly Standard, and Red Alert Politics. Good to see you, Michael.
Well, I just got back from CPAC, and boy, are my driving arms tired. We just never going to make it out of there. I was going to tell her. Hope she's got a room. Place was packed. It was crazy.
Yeah, well, so you were there. So give me a sense of what it was like. Kellyanne Conway joked that it should be called TPAC, as in T for Trump. Is that what it felt like to you?
I would say VPAC, as in V for victory. I think Ouija's report hit on the key element. When you win, it is so easy to forgive 1,000 failings. It's easy to paper over the disagreements on issues that would normally come up at CPAC, like trade and free markets and small government. Remember, CPAC has traditionally been a place where Ron Paul, the libertarian, used to rock. And then what do you have today? News that the Trump administration is going to crack down on states that have locally legalized marijuana. I mean, the fact is, there are big ideological gaps. CPAC has traditionally been a place where ideology was a core part of the mix. It wasn't just a party, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a convention where I'm here because I'm a Republican, Democrat. There was always a political, young college activist element to it. But what I saw today were people who papered it over. I hate to shamelessly shill something on your show, but I will. We do a podcast every day at Washington Examiner, the first 100 days. And today I handed the podcast over to the folks at CPAC. I got 25 people stuck in a line and just went right through. How do you think Trump is doing? And again, two messages came out. One is, we are amazed that he's doing what he said he would do. You know, the immigration executive order, the rollout was botched. There's a lot of a debate, but they loved it. He said he was going to do something immigration, and look, he's doing it. And then the second thing I heard again and again was, give the guy a chance. You know, sometimes we in the media, and I definitely am guilty of this, we forget it's been a month. You know, I mean, we're in the media. You add media plus Trump, and now you're in like that movie Interstellar, where years go by in minutes and stuff. And so we've lost perspective that for the people who are out going to work every day and who, just follow politics from a distance, he's been in office a month. Give him a chance was the message I heard at CPAC today.
Michael, let me ask you the question that I asked Ouija about the appearance of Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus on the same stage. Clearly, Steve Bannon doesn't give a lot of interviews, or you rarely hear from him. How exciting was it for the crowd?
Well, it was interesting to me that Steve Bannon, usually in the past, the celebrity is someone like running for president. It's the Cruzes and the Rubios. And here's Steve Bannon is the guy. But like you said, no one's ever seen him. They were curious. They wanted to see the body language between Priebus and Bannon. And I got to tell you, when it was over, the group I was with, we were all talking about, okay, so Priebus is definitely the Tony Randall character in The Odd Couple, and Bannon is Jack Klugman. Are they going to move into we want to see it.
We may
want
be a little too old
TV.
For that reference there.
I want reality TV to move in. They say they spend all day together anyway, 6:30 a.m. to 11. I say get out The Odd Couple and let's make TV out of it.
Well, let's play some sound from the two of them talking and addressing the conference.
The biggest misconception is everything that you're reading. We're different, but we're very similar, is that I think that he is very dogged in making sure that every day the promises that President Trump has made, and Steve is very consistent and very loyal to the agenda and is a presence that I think is very important to have in the White House. And I consider him, and secondly, and a very dear friend, and someone that I work with every second of the day, and actually I cherish his friendship.
So there you saw both of them sort of addressing what's been out there in some media reports, Michael, that they don't get along, that they're both competing for the president's ear. At least in that appearance, they seem to be, as Ouija pointed out, in the midst of a bromance.
I don't know anybody here in D.C. who covers the White House regularly who believes that. They don't necessarily believe that they're at each other's throats or that it's divided. But I mean, think about it. They just have fundamentally different approaches. When Bannon talks about a globalist, corporatist cabal, that runs the media, and that we've got to have this, this civilizational struggle. Reince Priebus is like a Wisconsin guy who worked in the Republican Party. He's thinking about, how do I get Mrs. Schmeckeldeckel to donate the $100,000 and not get mad that Mrs. Winglebingle is at the wrong table. He comes from that very political, very, pragmatic world. They clearly have different worldviews. Doesn't mean that they hate each other or can't get along, but there's definitely two different visions at work simultaneously. And right now, Trump is bringing them together. But I think, let's get back to the V word, victory. The question is, can President Trump hold the CPAC-style coalition together if things don't go well, if there's a setback that affects his base, if, for example, they don't overturn Obamacare, if he has to come out and say, yeah, it's not going to happen, will that coalition stick with him? If his poll numbers continue to sag and they get dangerously low, will they stay together, or does he need wins to keep this coalition together? That's my question. Michael,
I want to ask you something that touches upon the comment you just made about bringing two perhaps different opposing views together. I want to ask you about a comment specifically the president made earlier about his immigration memo. I'm going to play some sound and then get your reaction out of it.
You see what's happening at the border. All of a sudden, for the first time, we're getting gang members out. We're getting drug lords out. We're getting really bad dudes out of this country, and at a rate that nobody's ever seen before. And they're the bad ones. And it's a military operation because what has been allowed to come into our country, when you see gang violence that you've read about like never before and all of the things, much of that is people that are here illegally. And they're rough and they're tough, but they're not tough like our people. So we're getting them out.
All right, Michael. So Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly later said very forcefully immigration enforcement was not a military operation. Press Secretary Sean Spicer walked those comments back. He said the president was using it in the form of an adjective, but it seems to be a recurring theme here. The president says something and his surrogates or members of the cabinet have to walk them back, or they have to go to our allies and say, look, the president may have said this, but this is actually what the United States is intending on doing. Does that undermine the president at all?
I think people are going to get tired of it. I know that I spend a fair bit of my time with the content I help create, basically Trump-splaining to the world what it is that we think he meant or what his allies say he meant. I mean, someone's going to write a screenplay, The Trump Whisperer. There's going to be a major Hollywood film, and it's off-putting and it's tiring and it takes energy away. It's interesting. The immigration issue was brought up again and again at CPAC because they've been talking about immigration at CPAC for 15, 20 years. This is not new for them. And when Trump misstates a common sense goal, it means more work for supporters. And they've got plenty of work to do, with the messes, the media fires that Trump sets already.
Right. Look, I think it's fair that most people will say one of the things that they love about President Trump is the fact that he's sort of plain spoken. He doesn't sound like a lawyer. He doesn't, read off. His thoughts are not in that lawyer speak that a lot of politicians are associated with. But I was thinking, when I heard that comment, my first thought was, well, he is the president of the United States, and these words are going to be translated into other languages. They're not going to understand what Sean Spicer said to the American media, that the president's using that term to indicate precision. He's using it as an adjective. That word is going, or that phrase is going to go into the newspapers of the countries that we're allied with and those of our enemies and say, look, the president is using the military to combat immigration.
And there are plenty of Trump supporters who would say, good, scare these people. Clearly they haven't respected America's border. They've, under the Obama years, they literally walked across the border and said, arrest me so I can stay. There have been other issues. But I just want to say one thing. I agree with your point about the foreign media. But it is a little distressing in the domestic media where people know where Trump is trying to go, where they know that his language is less than precise. Sometimes I feel like fights are invented, conflicts are invented. I promise you, everybody in the mainstream media out there, you don't have to invent fights with Trump. He'll pick plenty of his own. You don't have to push him over. He'll fall down.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
He's a weeble. He wobbles, but he doesn't fall. He's going to keep wobbling.
All right, let's turn to another topic, the topic of health care. That's another focus, obviously, at CPAC. Here's what former House Speaker John Boehner said Thursday about the prospects of repeal and replace.
All this happy talk that went on in November and December and January about repeal. Yeah, we'll do replace. I started laughing because if you pass repeal without replace, you'll never pass replace because they will never, ever agree on what the bill should be. I shouldn't have called it repeal and replace because that's not what's going to happen. They're basically going to fix the flaws and put a more conservative box around it.
All right, so Boehner's got nothing to lose, basically saying not going to happen. You think he's right?
Well, I mean, I think, as so many often is the case, it kind of comes to semantics. It's like, what is an American-made car? You've got a car factory in Michigan, but the parts come from Mexico and Canada and Japan. What is repealed and replaced? I mean, there are parts of Obamacare that people want to keep. An obvious example is if you have a pre-existing condition, you should still be able to get, health insurance. So if the replace keeps that, you could argue, well, it's not a replace, it kept something. And so I think it really is going to be a political determination. If the Republicans pass something that says we are repealing Obamacare, and then they can pass something that is significantly different, particularly if it loses the individual mandate, I think they can stand up and say, yeah, we got rid of the old thing, we have this new thing. Does it have some of the stuff from the old thing? Yeah, but it's mostly a new thing, and it'll come down to a political decision by the public. The other big political decision by the public is, how is it working? And one of the smart things that Vice President Pence did today, and that I predict President Trump will do tomorrow, is remind people of how awful Obamacare has been for real people. A tiny number of people, quote, benefited because they got shoved on the Medicaid. Well, that's nice, but many, many more people suffered by losing plans they liked, by having their premiums explode, by having deductibles that make basically their insurance not usable. And if Republicans keep reminding people that why you want to get rid of Obamacare in the first place, that will help them get the energy they need to do something new.
All right, Michael Graham, so are you going back tomorrow?
Oh, how do you miss CPAC? It's the place to be. Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it for the world.
All right. We'll hopefully talk to you then. Michael Graham in Washington, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, does President Trump have an approval rating problem, or does the White House have other bigger concerns? CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvano breaks down the latest CBS News poll numbers next. Plus, a Muslim in the Trump White House. Why a member of the National Security Council says she left after just 8 days. You're watching Red and Blue. As the president gets set to address the Conservative Political Action Conference on Friday, also known as CPAC, Americans remain divided on the job he's doing in office. The latest CBS News poll out Thursday shows that just 39% of Americans approve of Mr. Trump's performance to date, while 51% disapprove of the job he is doing. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. So here with me to take a deeper dive into the polls is CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvano. Good to see you.
Vlad, how are you?
So let's talk about this. A ton of numbers came out today. I want you to take us through them, but start with the economy, because 61% of Americans polled say the economy is in good shape.
Right, and that's actually the highest number that we have found in this poll since before the Great Recession. So that optimism, that state of the economy number, that's up. The reason it's up is that Republicans now say that they think the economy is in good shape. And that's a big, big switch from right before President Trump took office, where before that, Republicans much less likely, 30 points less likely, to say the economy was in good shape. What you learn from that, Vlad?
Which is interesting because the economy, it's only been a month.
It's
December of
only been
2016.
Well, exactly. But see, this is where you learn a little bit about how people answer poll questions and also how they make decisions. So the economy, you would think it's this objective thing, right? It's the gas prices and the stock market and unemployment and all of that. Well, it is, but for a lot of people, it's also about how much optimism they feel and whether or not their person is in office, is running the country. And so we've seen this increasingly over time where partisan views get inserted into broader measures about how the country is doing, and this is one prime example.
Really fascinating. All right, let's talk about immigration. The poll found that 60% of Americans feel that illegal immigrants here in the U.S. should be able to stay and apply for citizenship. Break down those numbers for us.
Right. Here again, you see big divides. While it is true that most folks say there should be some kind of path to citizenship or at least some kind of a work visa, but the Republican base is much more in favor of what you might call a deportation or having folks who are here illegally be forced to leave. And in fact, although about 40% of Republicans would also favor some kind of a work visa, there is that base, that conservative base, that is the most strongly in favor of deportation. So when you look at what's going on now, when you look at the policies, who supports them, definitely that Republican base is going to be strongly in favor.
What's really fascinating about these polls is how the Republican base is reacting to Russia. There are a lot of questions from Democrats about the Trump administration and its ties to Russia. 44% of Americans say the approach to Russia is just right. Break down those numbers.
Here again, same story, common thread through all of this, partisanship, where you find Republicans much more likely to say, in fact, overwhelmingly likely to say, that they think the president's approach to Russia is about right. And diametrically opposed to that, Democrats, who overwhelmingly say that he's being too friendly, that the approach is not right. So you get a certain they're following their president. They're following their president on this. And that's also a shift that we have seen since President Trump took office. If you look at these numbers going back further, views among Republicans towards Russia, much more mixed.
I really do find that number fascinating, that 44% of Americans say his approach to Russia is just right, because even Republican legislators have said, for example, John McCain, that Vladimir Putin's a thug. Even Bill O'Reilly, when he interviewed the president, said Vladimir Putin's a killer. The president responded that we've done some crazy things too, but it's just surprising.
And in fact, we asked about Vladimir Putin in the poll, and more Republicans have moved from they're not favorable towards Vladimir Putin, but they are more undecided now than they have been. So even they've sort of moved to this sort of neutral position. Again, part of foreign policy is people aren't necessarily always geopolitical experts, so they do follow their leaders, and that makes sense to do that in a lot of respects. But in this case, too, you see that partisanship coming in there as well, following their president, at least for the time.
Yeah, I'm going to read this because, so in May of 2014, Democrats and Republicans held similar views of Vladimir Putin. Today, unfavorable views of Putin have risen 12 points among Democrats, while unfavorable views of Putin among Republicans have dropped 13.
Right.
Partisanship.
Partisanship.
It's a beautiful thing.
Partisanship.
No, it's not.
Well, it's a real thing.
Right,
I mean, it's a real thing. It is what almost defines this country's politics today, and so you just have to reckon with it. I mean, to the extent that people are paying attention, that they know where their party or their party's president stands on an issue, that means they're engaged. But to the extent that they're then following or taking their cues from that, means it just underlines how much power, you talk about the bully pulpit, you talk about the presidency and what that can do, especially for a base. And we know that Donald Trump supporters consistently tell us that they follow his lead, that they think that he is the one telling the truth on policies and following that. So it just underlines how much power that bully pulpit really has.
It'll be interesting to see going forward if the president is able to expand beyond that base to people that are not his hardcore followers, which most presidents try to do. At this point, he doesn't seem that interested in doing it. He's talked about uniting the country, but from all intents and purposes, what we see here is more of a solidification of his base as opposed to an expansion.
And that is precisely the question. And I think even as you look ahead to next week, where he gives his address to Congress, right? We know from this poll and from others that there is a large group of people out there who are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach. And even in this poll, you hear folks say they have confidence in him in improving the economy. They're optimistic about what he can do to create jobs. But they also don't yet think he has a clear plan to do it. Right. So they're in that wait-and-see mode. They're waiting to see what he does, and that's separate from that base that's with him all the way. If he can bring some of those people over, I suspect his approval ratings could grow. But that's the key question. Does he go beyond what he currently has? And what he has is solid. Does he go beyond it?
Wait and see. Anthony Salvanto, always fascinating insights. Appreciate it, man. Thanks, you. Man. A former White House staffer is sharing her story about why she decided to quit the Trump administration. Rumana Ahmed says she was the only hijab-wearing Muslim woman working in the West Wing. Ahmed started her job at the White House back in 2011, but once President Trump took office, she says it only lasted 8 days. She explained her decision to leave in a new op-ed in The Atlantic, saying, "When Trump issued a ban on travelers from 7 Muslim-majority countries and all Syrian refugees, I knew I could no longer stay and work for an administration that saw me and people like me not as fellow citizens, but as a threat." Well, up next, we'll take a look at the headlines that will give you a head start for Friday, including a new report out about the role Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner may have played in one of President Trump's executive orders. Plus, new reaction to President Trump's decision to rescind rules on bathroom protections for transgender students. We'll talk with an educator who's also a member of the trans community about what the move means for teachers and students when Red and Blue returns right after this. Here's a look at some of the headlines you will be talking about on Friday. The New York Times reports New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is meeting with federal prosecutors and the FBI on Friday. They've reportedly been investigating the mayor's campaign fundraising for the past year. The Times says a grand jury has heard evidence in a corruption case looking into whether the mayor or people in his administration gave favors to donors in his 2013 campaign. And the Seattle Times reports Washington Governor Jay Inslee is planning on pushing back against one of the president's recent executive orders. On Thursday, the governor signed an order restricting state workers and agencies from helping enforce federal immigration laws. Under the order, agencies can't use state resources to ask about a person's immigration status. And the Wall Street Journal reports Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner have some sway over the president's executive orders. The paper says the couple struck down language critical of a global climate deal from an upcoming executive order. The order reportedly targets former President Obama's broad climate agenda, something President Trump vowed to dismantle during the campaign. Well, demonstrators gathered outside the Stonewall Inn in New York City Thursday night as a show of support for transgender youth. They were speaking out against the Trump administration after it reversed Obama administration guidance on school bathroom use, ending protections put in place for transgender students. Under the former president, students could use bathrooms based on the gender they identified with. But the Trump administration says it's a decision states and school districts should make. Here's what Education Secretary Betsy DeVos had to say about this on Thursday.
Well, I think the statement spoke to it for itself and to a large extent. But let me just say that this issue was a very huge example of the Obama administration's overreach to suggest a one-size-fits-all federal government approach, top-down approach to issues that are best dealt with and solved at a personal level and a local level. And I have made clear from the moment I've been in this job that it's our job to protect students and to do that to the fullest extent that we can, and also to provide students, parents, and teachers with more flexibility around how education is delivered and how education is experienced, and to protect and preserve personal freedoms.
Dr. S.J. Miller is the Deputy Director of Educational Equity Supports and Services at New York University, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, S.J., tell me a little bit about yourself and what you made of Betsy DeVos's comments today.
Sure. So first of all, I think it's important to put my identity out there because I speak not only on behalf of trans youth, but I am a trans academic. I am one of very few tenured transgender academics in teacher education in the United States. And we have very few female to male trans people in the media talking about these issues. So I think it's important that we're here and that we speak up and we speak out and we speak loud on behalf of all of our constituents. I am deeply concerned about this rollback. Not only am I concerned because I believe that the policies are dangerous, but it has created a widespread hysteria and fear in not only our children, but the parents, the communities in which they are engaging, as well as their parents. I was able to pan out a little bit yesterday on live stream to watch what was going on in front of the White House, and there are kids crying. They're hysterical. They don't feel safe to go back into schools. And when you have a rollback like this, it sends a very clear message that these kids don't matter, that there's an erasure going on, there's a push out going on. And I believe that this bathroom situation is the first of many that are going to be taken away from kids.
Explain for our viewers who may not understand or may not know why this is such an important issue, the question of which bathroom a person can use.
Yeah, so I think people take for granted in general that they need to go to the bathroom, and where do they need to go to the bathroom? And for young kids, they don't necessarily care early on, but that becomes policed into them and socialized into them later in life, where they want to be in a bathroom where they feel safe and they feel comfortable. And what's happened now is that other kids are feeling threatened when a trans kid comes into a bathroom, and they start mocking them and teasing them because they don't feel like they belong there, and that their safety is in jeopardy, not the trans kid.
And so when you hear from the Secretary of Education, from the President, that this decision should be left to the states and not the federal government, what's your reaction to that?
You know, I used to believe that states' rights matter, and I do think in many cases they do matter. But now I've had to rethink and dial back my own perspectives because, first of all, what I know about what Obama did, and I don't think that he overreached, but he did not put the federal guidance out for public comment, and because of that, there's been an upsurge of criticism, and in fact, those letters are what are being debated right now, along with the Gavin Grimm case. So we're very concerned about both of those being enacted, and so with regard to the federal guidance, taking away bathroom privileges, I think, is the first step of many other rollbacks that we're going to see come down the case. And we know that the word sex, that's what's at hand, the issue of the word sex and the way that it was interpreted from within the Title IX documents, is really what's being debated. So, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, so that's what's being debated. And I think that in whatever way that is found to rule, it's going to have deep consequences for the remainder of the guidance. And now that Trump has appointed his own people within the OCR, all of these protections could be taken away entirely.
Clearly, you are able to speak about the issues that young trans kids may be feeling and going through. How would you explain to parents who don't understand that, who say, look, I'm completely fine with transgender people, but I'm concerned about my own children. If you had to take sort of their point of view and walk a mile in their shoes, what would you say to them for them to understand?
I would say that identity is on a continuum. I would say that all of us are in current states of being and understanding ourselves, and I would ask those parents to dial back their own thinking and memories to their own childhood and ask, are you the same person you were when you were a child? And think about the natural trajectory that you took as an adult or as a person to get to where you are now as an adult, and think about your child in those shoes. You have no idea the direction that your own child is going to go, and that every child has a right to gender self-determination and to justice within his or her or her lives, and that children should be allowed to express and experience an identity, be a trailblazer, be a forager, and just be free to be whoever they need to be.
There have been a lot of companies, businesses that have sided against what the president has indicated he wants to do. They've pulled out of concerts, for example. Sports teams have made it clear that they're not happy about it. When you hear that, does that give you some level of hope?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that the uptick of all of these rollbacks and the other dangerous policies that are coming out of DC are going to impact businesses that people start to defund certain areas and certain organizations, and that they do pull out. I think that the way that we fight back is to hit Trump where life matters to him, which is in his deep pockets.
And finally, what's your message? Because what is happening now is the government is saying, look, it's going to be left up to the states and the individual school districts to make these decisions. What's your message to them, to the educators, to the school districts?
Be bold. Think about the children. Think about their need to be in an environment that's free of bullying and harassment. Studies show that kids' motivation and cognition shut down. They are impacted. They're not able to think and process and be present and be recognized. And that these policies have to support kids and their academic and emotional and psychological well-being. And that schools need to be vigilant. They need to fight. They need to support their kids and their teachers together, as well as their community members. And they need to figure out how to create coalitions, not only within school districts, but statewide, and then across the country. And we need to band together. We need to fight back, and we need to keep growing that and grow the momentum, because it's there. There's a groundswell, and people are upset. They're motivated. They are ready. They are ready to take back the schools in ways I don't think we've ever seen before.
Well, thank you so much for coming by and spending some time with us and explaining this. It's really great to have you on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
S.J. Miller, we really appreciate the insight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
447 members of the Democratic National Committee will vote on a new chair this weekend, and the race to lead the party just got a little bit smaller. Chairman of the South Carolina Democratic Party, Jamie Harrison, dropped out of the race Thursday and is now endorsing former Labor Secretary Tom Perez. There are still 5 candidates left in the race, but as of now, the 2 frontrunners, Perez and Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison, do not have a clear majority to win the election. Before we go to break, here's a look at Stephen Colbert's war on InfoWars during his Late Show monologue Wednesday night. Colbert blasted President Trump's relationship with Alex Jones, the right-wing conspiracy theorist who runs InfoWars, or the man Colbert says has a reputation for telling it like it isn't. Take a listen.
Bit of a hothead, loose cannon, powder keg, dump truck, pull tab, which is why it's important for him to be counseled by people who are even-keeled. Unfortunately, he's talking to some jerk named Alex Jones, the far-right conspiracy theorist who is apparently taking on a new role as occasional information source and validator for Trump, with whom he sometimes speaks on the phone. Okay, information source, validator speaks on the phone. Sounds okay. Good to have a variety of voices in a time of crisis. Let's see what this guy's like.
I'm animated. I'm alive. My heart's big. It's got hot blood going through it fast. I like to fight, too. I like to eat. I like to have children. I'm here. I got a life force. This is a human. This is what we look like. This is what we act like. This is what everybody was like before us. This is what I am.
This is why you don't mix steroids with peyote. This is why. This is it. I don't know how to explain this, but just watching that clip, he somehow got spittle on me. So Alex Jones has influence in the White House. Trump has even sent in messages to Alex Jones' show congratulating him on his great reputation. Now, if you've been living underground for the last few years, you probably listen to Alex Jones. But for the rest of you, he runs a conspiracy website called InfoWars, okay? The name's easy to remember. Just imagine info, then imagine someone at war with it. And Donald Trump's phone buddy has gained a reputation for telling it like it isn't. Like this explanation as to why men are gay.
The reason there's so many gay people now is because it's a chemical warfare operation. Here's the inside of this juice box. And if they zoom in any more, see that thin plastic? It's got it. After you're done drinking your little juices, well, you're ready to go out and have a baby. You're ready to put makeup on. You're ready to wear a short skirt.
Yes, juice boxes make men into women. A couple of sips and suddenly your Capri Sun is your Capri daughter. It's happening. Now, obviously, it's not fair to judge a guy on one isolated dumbass clip. So here's a bunch of them.
Alex is anti-gay. He's saying the chemicals are making people gay. Folks, it's making the frogs gay. 2/3 of the frogs down in Houston are bisexual. Every major Western country heavily involved in 9/11. It took me about a year with Sandy Hook to come to grips with the fact that the whole thing was fake. The attacks in Orlando were a false flag terror attack. Sometimes I hear my show and it sounds like the most powerful talk radio I've ever heard. Other times it sounds like a monkey doing you-know-what with a football.
So, to recap, one of the counselors to the president knows what it sounds like when a monkey a football. But Alex Jones is not content with talking to the leader of the free world. He's also hoping InfoWars will qualify for a White House press credential. So, to those of you working in the White House press pool, you're going to want to get some earplugs and a poncho.
After the break, Jamie Yukis will get you caught up on the rest of the day's news, including a report on the American dream in crisis, how dwindling profits and rising costs are putting the future of farming in question. We'll see you back here again on Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern. You're watching CBSN.